Welcome to Fridays at the Corridor. We are really excited for our speakers this morning. This is an educational forum for professionals and students. So take advantage of that time that we're able to be here together and to mingle and to get to know one another. We're all kind of in the same field. So we really appreciate you being here. We appreciate Henry Link and Paul Burbage being with us as well. They are a wealth of knowledge, and I am sure you will learn a lot, and it's a great way to start a Friday. So I'm going to pass it over to Henry, and we'll get started. Thanks, Henry.
Good morning, everybody. Trust everybody is awake and alert yet this morning. It can be a little bit early morning for some of us, myself included, but it takes a little bit extra to get down to downtown Charleston, especially if you have to start out kind of early. But my name, again, Henry Link. I work for Life Cycle Engineering in North Charleston. We do a number of different things, both commercial and government. My group, the Federal Solutions Group, actually works with quite a bit with SPAWAR, the Naval Weapons Station in Hanahan. What I'd like to talk about this morning, once I start our little presentation, there we go. What I'd like to talk about this morning, I was somewhat inspired by with a talk at the Chamber of Commerce gathering last month with Mr. Frank Abagnale. I always mispronounce his name. Frank Abagnale, who is a major leading figure in information security who works with the federal government. And what I'd like to talk about is kind of a double meaning title, the Defending the Indefensible. And what did we learn from the security breaches of 2014? There were a number of security breaches this year to date, over 200 as a matter of fact, but three in particular that stood out for their size and scope, which we're going to talk about. I'd like to talk about those, and I'd like to talk about some of the information we can gather from what happened during these breaches, how they were handled, how we as individuals should respond, as well as members of our companies, as something greater than ourselves. Let's see. Oh. There we go. Took a little delay. You have been compromised. I have been compromised. We all have at various times. I'd like to take your attention to a particular website, this privacyrights.org. It's a wonderful little site if you've never been there. But they run a chronology of data breaches. They basically have an online web form for a database of all the publicly disclosed data breaches since the year 2005, specifically to the United States. But according to their site, they have recorded over 900 million individual records breached in the United States since the year 2005. What does that mean for us? It means that for a U.S. population of just over 300 million, we have all at some point lost data. We have all at some point had our private information exposed to someone to whom it should not have. It means that no one is safe from data exposure and data breaches. We talk about a breach just recently at healthcare.gov. Home Depot, which is one of the ones that we're actually going to be talking about today. We're talking about not just a few records exposed. We're talking about, in many cases, millions of records exposed, with enough information to have someone open a fraudulent credit line, to engage in credit card theft, to engage in direct bank funds theft. So what it means for us is that we need to be aware of how these breaches happened and what we can do about it as individuals. And the first thing we're going to note in all of these breaches is it takes just one person. One breach that I haven't really dealt with today, or won't be dealing with today, that was all in the news late last year was the 2013 Target store chain breach. It began with nothing more difficult than a malware attachment to an email with an HVAC vendor named Fazio Mechanical, and as a result, with someone managing to obtain their credentials to target's private networks, was able to gain entry to those networks, to install malware attached to their POS systems, to be able to data scrape and gain access to millions of individual credit card transactions, all because of one malware phishing expedition that was successful. In 2011, the Microsoft Security Intelligence Report stated, and this number has probably increased since then, most of their focus has been on other issues in later years, but in 2011 they stated that almost half of all malware required some sort of user interaction to complete the exploit. Let's think about that for a minute. We hear about things like shell shock, which I don't want to take away the gravity of it, as we'll be seeing later on. We hear about heartbleed. We hear about these exploits that, through possibly no fault of the user or the administrator, can expose data. However, we also have to be aware that the majority of data breaches in this country, across the world actually, the majority of these data breaches all come down to failure of one individual to follow the training that they've received. Or in some cases, perhaps they've had insufficient training to not click on random links that are sent to them, to be aware of the information that's coming in, to be aware of the URLs that they're going to be clicking on to access different pieces of information, of attachments, random attachments sent to them to open. These kind of things, all it takes is that one. Once they've got that toehold, then more meaningful exploitation can continue after that. I've called this slide "Trouble Comes in Threes." I should probably say trouble comes in 300s. Like I said, there were something like, according to that site, there were like 235 to date, and that probably has increased. But the three I'm talking about today are going to be the Michaels and Aaron's Brothers stores breach back in January, where a total between the two chains of 3 million records were exposed. I'd like to talk about the eBay breach, which actually exposed somewhere north of 145 million pieces of customer data. And Home Depot, which is the most recent one in everybody's memory in the news, which exposed somewhere around 56 million data transactions and personal information records. So what do we learn from each of these three data breaches? In the case of the Michaels and Aaron's Brothers stores, it affected their point of sale systems in all of their 1,200 stores in the U.S. They have a list on their website of every store that was affected, their locations, as well as the dates that they were affected. If you shopped at any Michaels store, including the one here over on Rivers Avenue, if you shopped at that store within a certain time period, and this time period was between May 8th of last year and January, I know for a fact, then your information was possibly exposed in this breach. Now, due to the methods that the attackers used, it exposed information on about 7% of all the transactions. So it didn't get every transaction that came through, but that's still a significant amount of data transactions. Enough to measure about 2.6 million of them, as a matter of fact. The breached records we found contained, quote, certain payment card information, such as payment card number and expiration date. If we are attempting to commit identity theft, that's two major pieces of information. You need your name, you need the credit card number, you need the expiration date. If you manage to get a hold of your control number, you're pretty much done as far as that goes. POS malware, the POS malware that they reported on was, according to their official statement, quote, highly sophisticated and had not been encountered previously by either of the two security firms that Michaels had retained in order to investigate this breach. Now, That term, highly sophisticated, we see it an awful lot, as a matter of fact. Where have we heard that term, highly sophisticated attack, before? Oh yeah, the Target breach. In their quotes, Fazio Mechanical Services had confirmed, saying that they were a victim of a sophisticated cyber attack operation and that it was cooperating with the retailer and the U.S. Secret Service. However, in a SANS Institute, and those of you who are definitely more interested in information security should visit the SANS Institute site. The classes, the courses that they offer, the classes that they teach in locations across the U.S. are probably some of the most advanced, also admittedly the most expensive, security training courses that you will ever take. But the SANS Institute did a after-action report containing information such as the email, that an email containing malware was sent to Fazio Mechanical 2 months prior to the card breach. So what we're talking about is a Trojan attached to an email was how they managed to get access to computers at Fazio Mechanical. As a result, they were able to get access to the logons and passwords of Fazio Mechanical's individual users to be able to access Target's network. That's not that complex. All it took was one person clicking on a random link to cause a breach of this nature. And malware installed on the vendor machines may have been Citadel, an open-sourced, my attribution there based on my research on Citadel, an open-sourced password-stealing bot program. What is it about Citadel? Was it something that was highly custom crafted by the individual exploiter in this case? No. Citadel has an online presence that is not that easily found, but those who know where to look can find it. It's not that hard. Where they actually develop Citadel and they actually take customer requests as to what new exploiting features can be added into Citadel. They actually upvote or downvote features that can be added to the malware. So all it took was somebody able to get basically an off-the-shelf Trojan to attach to an email, or stand up a website that had the malware attached where all you had to do was click on a link. There you are, you're exposed. Secondly, all they had to do was take basically an off-the-shelf package, so to speak, and install it once they had that access. So what they had was an app that was data scraping, downloading it to a local SMB server, or Samba server for those of you who know what I'm talking about there, and pushing it up to a temporary FTP server where they grabbed the data after it was taken. Basically about every 10 minutes is what they were saying. So they were just uploading all the transactions that were going through Target's point of sale every 15 minutes or so. So again, not that hard. And in case you're wondering about my little graphics chosen, that's my little way of just avoiding making sure I don't accidentally create any copyright infringement myself by using the company's graphics. But eBay, we all know eBay. Quick show of hands, how many of you have ever shopped at eBay before? Okay, yeah, me too. My wife especially. But several employee credentials from eBay employees were compromised and allowed attackers to gain access to the corporate network. This was sometime around February. In roughly late February, early March, eBay had discovered the breach. The compromise, this is from their official statement, included customer names, encrypted passwords, email addresses, physical addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, but they reassure us that no financial or credit card information was involved. That's very reassuring to me. But think about all the things that were exposed here. All of the stuff that you basically need to apply for a credit card, pretty much, except for your social security number. So all of this data that was breached, to the tune of about 145 million records worth, was not announced in May, when they finally did the announcement, was not announced on their main portal initially. It was announced as a press release on ebayinc.com, their corporate site. For those of you who have been shopping at eBay, how many of you have ever visited or visited more than once in a year the ebayinc.com site? Anybody? Didn't think so. So yeah, they announced their data breach on the site that nobody ever visits. Now later, they did correct that fact and they started making it more widely known. Please, people, change your passwords because your encrypted passwords have been violated. But the importance here is obvious. They discovered the breach. The announcement was somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 days after the fact, and when it was announced, it was put in a rather inconspicuous spot. Talk about Home Depot. That was recent. That was September. Okay, September 2nd, as a matter of fact. And the thing about the Home Depot story breaking is that when it broke on the Krebs on Security site, and here's another site I highly recommend to everybody, krebsonsecurity.com. They often get this information faster than anybody, and this is one example of it. Home Depot found out about it and began its investigation on the same day that it was announced on Krebs's website. Basically, Krebs has a number of sources within the banking industry that he relies on to give him information about whenever they actually suspect a breach based on credit card activity. So, Home Depot finds out about the breach, they begin their investigation. It was a highly sophisticated software called Framework POS, which pretends to be McAfee antivirus. If you look at the Windows registry entries, which is where all applications store information about themselves, including uninstall info, that kind of thing, it actually says it's McAfee antivirus. If you look in your add remove programs, it'll be McAfee antivirus. It might be sitting right next to McAfee antivirus. But the idea is to throw off suspicion by pretending it's something else. The software code contained anti-American statements, but it's believed that the goal was not political and that the target was the passwords and financial info. So I did have possible political leanings in any event, but keeping in mind that whether it's terrorists funding this illegal activity, whether it is organized crime from different countries funding this activity, whether it is just simple drive-by single individual users, the target is that data so that they can illegally fund whatever it is they want to fund. They, again, this is similar to the software in the Target breach, but not written by the same person, it's believed. Used memory scraping techniques to obtain credit card info and financial info and stored them for upload to an offsite FTP server. So it's very common practice overall. Get that toehold in, and then you can install malware that just stays passive in the background and keeps monitoring transactions. All to the concept here. Well, we're not all individual information security professionals. We do not all spend hours upon hours researching the best possible ways to secure our network, so we get other people to do that for us. And that's an actually great idea. But we must be careful in whom we trust. In particular, I love this particular story. Ricky Joe Mitchell, the former lead security engineer at Home Depot's stores, while this breach was occurring, I might add, was arrested and convicted of sabotaging the security network of his previous employer. Intervest Operating, where he remotely accessed Intervest computer systems and reset their company's network servers to factory settings, basically causing them a huge bill in terms of lost revenue and time spent getting back to where they needed to be. So this leads to another important point. Who or in whom do we trust? That's an important point, okay? Who do we actually take to help secure our networks? And have we vetted them? Have we checked on them? Have we performed our necessary background checks to make sure that just because someone says that they are good with computers doesn't necessarily mean that they have all of the credentials it takes to help secure your networks? Add to this the fact that there isn't one overriding federal standard for breach disclosures. Not yet, anyway. The two most commonly cited, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, and that one mainly holds for financial institutions, and the one that a lot of us are familiar with, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. They are the two most common standards for information security with regards to government oversight and regulation. But even with these two acts, keep in mind, HIPAA has a 60 to 90 day window. If they know every individual for whom, or they know how to directly contact every individual for whom data was breached, they have to send a notice to each individual within 60 days. Or, if there's no way they can know that, which is more often the case, they can post a public notice within 90 days of the breach or within a reasonable time period of said breach. The GLBA does not have a window for disclosure. It only says that if they are willingly disclosing their information to other individuals or other organizations, they do have to make you aware of who they are disclosing to. But there isn't any specific language about rectification and notification after breaches. However, this tide is changing. This is just one article I found from the King and Spalding client alert, where they talk about the fact that now that data breaches have received a lot more press attention, that it is now coming to federal sources, it's coming to different lawmakers, that somebody needs to do something about this. Somebody needs to actually step up and give us regulation that actually covers data breach notifications and make sure that we are better protected than what we are in terms of data breaches right now. So, what are the kind of lessons that we can learn? Very simple lessons, really. From this, we can learn that security is everyone's responsibility. It isn't just down to the system administrators and the information assurance personnel to protect us from data breaches. We need to be aware as individuals. We need to make sure that our staff and our employees, we need to make sure that we ourselves have the required training to make sure that we do not perform any activity that could result in a data breach. And be more aware of the links we click. Be more aware of how we answer random phone calls for information. I'm sure all of us have gotten those at one time or another. Someone that just randomly spot calls and asks for information about our information technology infrastructure. Things like that. Could be a random cold call. It could be a pretexting in order to gain information about our infrastructures. So security is everybody's responsibility. Trust but verify. Everybody talks about these attacks as being highly sophisticated, but that's a way to throw off responsibility. Personal responsibility for each and every one of us. Just as the companies must be responsible, their employees must be responsible. We must be responsible to make sure someone is not feeding us a line about how impregnable their organization is. No one is impregnable. There is always going to be vulnerabilities. It is always going to be a back and forth conversation of how we find vulnerabilities, patch against those vulnerabilities, and take steps with our personnel. It doesn't take a genius to do these things. The software I talked about, the malware, the point of sale malware, basically off the shelf when you get down to it. They're open source. They're available to anybody who's really looking for them. It's not that hard. We need to prepare for the breach. We should assume that we are going to be breached at some point in the future. If there's anything those 900 breaches talks about and teaches us, it's that we're all going to be breached at some point for our information. We need to be aware of this. We need to make sure we are prepared in the event of such a breach and be able to respond accordingly. We need to also be aware. We need to possess a situational awareness, not just about our information security, but about our physical security as well. Even though someone might not be able to get a malware into your organization, doesn't take that much to tailgate somebody into your secured facility. Doesn't take that much to give a pretext call to an unsuspecting personal assistant or secretary or a middle manager to actually just start feeding information right through the phone about how your organization is protected. We should be personally aware of security, both information and physical. And we should also become more involved in your own information security. There are classes for such, plenty of them are available. There are basic trainings like Security Plus that makes us aware, CompTIA's Security Plus, I should state, that make us aware of the entire framework of security as a whole and be able to understand the basics of how do we go about protecting ourselves. Okay? And to this end, I'll just wrap up by talking about an upcoming code camp offering, namely what LCE has branded the Hack Wars Information Security Code Camp. It's a one-day course that I believe we're shooting for January 23rd as our actual date for it. And we're going to be talking about pretty much most of these things that we just mentioned. We're going to be talking about common vulnerabilities. We're going to be talking about common misconfigurations. We're going to be talking about some of the basics, giving you the terms that you need in order to further your own understanding. One-day course is not going to make you an information security expert. Okay? It's not going to make you an information security professional. But it will give you the basic tools that you need to know where to go to find the information that you need to be searching for. It will teach you the basics of what you need to know and what you need to be questioning. Some of the things that we will be talking about in this class will be the CIA triangle. Quick show of hands here. How many of you have already heard of the term CIA triangle or are intimately familiar with it? Yes. And Paul, what would CIA be?
Confidentiality, integrity, and assurance.
Or availability, yeah. I've heard it both ways. But anyway, the CIA triangle. We talk about the balance between keeping that information secure, keeping it pure, keeping it from any kind of corruption, and also making sure it is available to the right people when they need it. We'll talk about defense in depth, layering your security. A lot of people think security is just a bunch of patches on a server and you're done. No, you need layers because layering security will improve your chances of avoiding a breach. Security policies and procedures. What is the difference between a policy and a procedure and how those things interact with our organizations? We'll talk about common attacks such as DDoS, phishing, vishing, Trojans, war driving, all of these things, just making you aware of what the heck these things are. Every field has its babble, its jargon, its technobabble, and information security is no different, but we want to make you aware of all of the different terminologies that you'll see people in information security or InfoSec throwing around all the time. We'll talk about common network protocols, about principles of network isolation. That one really could have helped Target if you want to know the truth of it. Just allowing an HVAC vendor a login to a machine that had unfettered access to the rest of their network pretty much. That's kind of where things go. Basic terms such as IPv4, IPv6, what's all the hubbub about those? NAT, VLAN, VPN, WLAN, explaining all of these things. And we'll talk a bit about physical security basics, things about avoiding tailgating, things of that nature. And then talk a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit about certain hardening concepts for computers. And just making sure of restricting computers to just the services that they need to be running. So those are the kind of things we talk about. I do want to thank everybody for your time today. Would anybody have any particular questions about the topics I was just speaking of? Yes?
I
I've been doing this thing for a while because I guess maybe I'm just naturally more paranoid than most people, but I have a credit card that's only got about like a $500 limit, and when I shop online, that's what I use. Now
Yes.
I'm wondering, let's say somebody compromises that, and what I do is I buy things and then I pay it off with my checking account. Now, is there some way that if they gain access to that credit card, they could backtrack somehow to the checking account that I used to pay it off? They're not directly linked, but
you're
I'm
right.
always just thinking, what
I
if,
won't.
what if?
I won't say anything's impossible, but I will say it's far less likely. I'll put it that way. As a matter of fact, I mentioned Mr. Frank Abagnale's speech for the Chamber of Commerce about last month, and one of the things he mentioned is that for his information security, one of the best things he decided to do for payment of everything, not just online but in day-to-day life, was to use a credit card, not a debit card, a credit card for all of his transactions. Because in the United States, you are not liable for any fraudulent credit card transaction. As long as you catch it quickly enough and you turn it around, if you can tell them, you report that that transaction is not yours, you are not liable for any fraudulent credit card transaction. He also mentioned that he uses that same logic for credit cards for his children so that he can build their credit to have good credit by the time they turn 18. The idea is it's one tool that he uses, being a credit card and being divorced from his personal banking accounts is an important distinction that he uses. And it's actually a great point to make.
I figured with a $500 limit, I mean, what are they going to do?
This is true.
Well, at last we can retire and give up this life of crime.
Exactly. Any other questions? All right. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for your time today, and certainly if you're interested in our Code Camp class in January, Matt can certainly fill you in on more details for that. All right. Thank you for your time today.
Give me a minute to get settled here, pull up this presentation. All right, good early morning. My name is Paul Burbage, I'm with Fish Lab. So today, I'm not sure if you've heard of the news, we're going to talk about the shell shock vulnerability and how that might affect your organization. Fast mouse there. A little bit of background on myself. I'm a security threat analyst with Fish Labs, been there about 2.5 years. My main passion with Fish Labs is not only doing malware analysis, but also finding vulnerabilities in PHP application. Huge fan of Trailer Park Boys. Not sure if you've seen that comedy or not, but it's really good. Pictured right as one of the characters, Bubbles, from that. There's quite a character there. All right, so today I'll give you a little bit of background on shell shock. Try not to go into too much technical detail this morning, being as early as it is. Don't want to cause any aneurysms or anything. So we'll talk about the vulnerability a little bit. Also give you an attack history as it exists in the wild, as that vulnerability was introduced into the wild or publicly disclosed. When I first thought about doing this presentation, I wanted to capture some live attack data, so I stood up some honeypots. I'll be sharing some of that info with you as well. And finally, we'll talk about how to mitigate these threats and also have a live exploit demonstration for you at the end. First, a little bit of a disclaimer. Since we are doing live exploitation, please do not try this at home, especially against servers that you do not own, unless you're a huge fan of getting your door kicked in by the feds. And again, some of the live attack data that I'll be showing, the actual websites or the domains are still active, so please do not try to visit those from your computer. All right, so shell shock is also known as bash bug, and the original person that discovered labeled it as bash door, so you might hear those words used interchangeably throughout the presentation. It was first discovered in September 12th and publicly disclosed September 24th. The bug was actually introduced in September 1989, so you can start to see a large footprint of vulnerable services or operating systems that have this bug in their software code. The bash itself is actually a command line interface for most Unix-based operating systems. Stands for Born Again Shell. It's pretty much how you interact with Unix-based operating system, whether you're executing commands or scripts or applications. The vulnerability itself is actually 4 or more software bugs. The first couple attempts to actually patch this vulnerability failed, so they were scrambling to get that as it was publicly disclosed. So yeah, there's quite a few, or roughly about 4 or 5 vulnerabilities that fall under the umbrella of shell shock. So the bug is, well, bash is actually a command line interpreter and a command in and of itself. The screenshot down here at the bottom is a screenshot of issuing the bash command on a vulnerable Linux instance. Again, not to get too technical on you, but essentially it comes about from environment variable handling or tampering, since there's no validity checks on previous environment variables. From there, you're able to execute bash with other operating system commands, which is known as an arbitrary OS command execution. And I wanted to briefly kind of touch on this with in comparison to SSL Heartbleed. It's kind of funny how the media chooses to cherry pick which vulnerabilities they want to expose and talk about publicly. You know, they made a huge deal. You may have heard about Heartbleed not too long ago. Heartbleed was essentially just a memory leak vulnerability, which might allow the miscreant to get information as far as credentials from memory leaks. But with shell shock, it allows a miscreant who successfully exploits that to actually be on the server as if they're typing commands on the server, but remotely. So I definitely think shell shock is 10 times worse than what Heartbleed is, especially the large footprint that I mentioned earlier, as far as how common it is within multiple Linux operating systems. So how prevalent is it? If you know where this is from, this is actually a screenshot from the Academy Award-winning movie Starship Troopers. So it is very prevalent. I thought that was a great way to show how prevalent it is. So how is someone able to exploit this remotely? Depends on the type of services that are running, mainly on Unix-based operating systems. And since this is, the exploit itself is on the command line interface level, you can actually test a server from the command line, which is what you see pictured up top there with the env or environment command. So if it is vulnerable, echo out vulnerable, and the bash /c ID command that you see to the right would be the example of arbitrary command execution. So anyone in here running cPanel for their website? No? All right, that's probably a good thing. I saw one hand maybe. Yeah. They have come out and said that is vulnerable to shell shock, so make sure that you're patched there for sure. So the live demo that I'll be doing for the exploit is over HTTP, and I'll show you how that works. Some other remote services that can be exploited through shell shock is dynamic host control protocol, secure shell, luckily only with authenticated sessions though, file transfer protocol, even open VPN, Oracle databases, and common Unix printing services. There's a great security researcher by the name of Muvix. I have his GitHub link down there at the bottom, but he's compiled a list of all the remote proof of concept codes for remotely exploiting shell shock, so you can check that out. All right, so I wanted to compile a timeline of attacks in the wild. So as vulnerabilities are publicly disclosed, you obviously have people that are really trying to search for them to use them to their advantage. Within the first hour of public disclosure, you start to see the first servers being compromised. Within the first 24 hours, botnets are already starting to emerge, which consists of multiple hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of compromised machines from shell shock. One of the first botnets was actually named after one of the researchers who publicly disclosed the first proof of concept code. His name was Robert, so the miscreants named their botnet after him. Thanks, Rob. I thought that was pretty funny. The second one being probably one of the most notorious ones was WAPBot, attacks on Akamai content distribution services. This botnet was also scanning Department of Defense servers and breaking in there, so it obviously gained quite a bit of attention from there. And these are mainly Perl-based internet relay chat bots. The reason why the miscreants are choosing Perl is that that's an interpreted language that is installed on most Linux operating systems by default. So I'll show you how some of those Perl bots work. I have a couple of the honeypot attacks that I've captured some of those. Then within 48 hours, I believe it was Encapsula, application firewall company, that said that they're seeing over 17,000 attacks from 400 unique IP addresses, and just from there it starts to go up logarithmically. Within a week, 1.5 million attacks or probes per day. Out of the week estimate there, Yahoo just recently said that they were compromised only like a week or two ago on October 6th. So quite a few high visibility intrusions just from this particular exploit. All right, so trying to capture live attack data for this presentation, I used a honeypot. For those not familiar with that term, is essentially just a vulnerable system that pretends to be vulnerable to capture live attacks on the internet. The particular project I use is called ShockPod. It's an open source project put out by ThreatStream's modern honeypot network, and I have a link there too if you'd like. It's a really cool web interface that sends you email alerts. So if you if you want to play around with more of honeypots, I definitely advise you to check that out. Screenshot there at the bottom of an actual alert that I believe, I'm not sure of that country flag, I believe it's Taiwan. But so when I first stood it up, not even 3 hours after setting it up, I got my first hit. And the particular shell shock injection from this environment variable was through the user agent string. So anytime that your browser connects to a website, the user agent is telling it, what type of browser you're coming from, whether that be Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, what have you. So there's ways to inject a shell shock exploit itself within the user agent of that actual command. So the particular command I have listed here is wget, which is just a command line browser, pulls down a shell script here that I have pictured down here at the bottom in the browser window. So what this does, the first attempt here, he's trying to pull down C source code, compile that, which is another IRC bot that this particular miscreant was using for his campaign. If that didn't work, then he's pulling down a Perl bot, executing that. Finally, if that doesn't work at all, he also uses the actual binary, Linux binary, tries to download that to join his IRC botnet. Here's actual screenshot of that Perl bot that this guy was trying to upload to my honeypot here. This is it's well-known Perl bot. You can download it for free. It's widely available. This one in particular interest, especially for what I do at Fish Labs, we do DDoS intelligence. So we have seen a lot of activity coming from shell shock, obviously. This particular bot is capable of doing UDP flood and TCP flood attacks. Also, within the shell shock vulnerability or the attacks that we're seeing now, miscreants are starting to use that to gain a foothold into an organization. So they're able to use the compromised servers that they have as a staging attack for further penetration into the network. And that's what mainly this Perl bot allows you to do. You can pretty much create a secure shell connection that would allow you to scan internally within the organization that's compromised. So it has a port scan capability, and it also has a service for spamming out email.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
You said within 3 hours you got your first attack.
Yes, sir.
How did you get found?
I'm sorry?
How did the initial discovery occur?
They're mass scanning mainly for just open port 80, and from there they just they try numerous amounts of web URLs to see whether or not it's vulnerable to shell shock. So you can actually see that. If any of y'all have a website, I'd go take a look at the logs, and you'll start to see CGI bin calls. More than likely, maybe even within the user agent string, you'll start to see some of these Perl bots that are trying to be compromising your website. So, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, it's just for mass scanning to see if it's so.
From this question though, like,
Sure.
when you say like mass scanning, like,
Mhm.
you know, like the whole internet, or how do they know? Because it's so huge. I mean, how do they?
My guess is that
It's crazy.
they're mainly, I stood these up on cloud service providers, mainly like Amazon, EC2, and DigitalOcean, some other VPS providers.
Oh, okay. So.
My guess is that they're scanning those ranges
Yeah.
because they want those compromised server resources. So that's more than what they're looking for. So they're more than likely, I mean, they're probably are scanning residential, ISP ranges, but the what they are using it for this particular IRC bot, they want those server resources for their other campaigns that they're utilizing.
So when they're pulling down the C, the Perl, and the binary, there's a man in the loop doing that? That's not an automated routine?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
There's a man in the loop that is, when they were pulling down and attempting to compile the C, the Perl, or the binary code.
No, this was automated exploitation. So these
Very
are
automated.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, these are other bots, other botnets scanning to increase other bots on the same botnet.
Okay.
Automated attacks. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about mitigation real quick. First and foremost, patch. And once you think you're patched, try to update and patch again. Especially web servers, anything that's internet facing. If it has a Linux stack, it's running bash, and it's definitely vulnerable. So you want to make sure that everything's patched. Everything from routers to switches can have a Linux stack, including your Internet of Things, as the term goes now. Toasters, refrigerators, all that good stuff. So anything can run Linux these days. Finally, you want to stand up a web application firewall for your perimeter assets. And finally, ask and inspect, don't expect or assume. If anything is running that, then just go ahead and assume that it is breached, and you definitely want to make sure that it's patched and not vulnerable. So before I kick off the live demo here, I'll have to switch laptops. Do I have any other further questions? Yes, sir.
Well, I know you were saying that this would affect like any Unix-based kind of system. Now, obviously,
Correct.
Linux would be up there, but I'm also wondering, isn't the Mac OS kind of like a Unix kind of based now too?
Good question. I have not seen a definitive answer on that. Of course, Apple says, "Hey, we're secure," which is we never have software bugs, right? But I have seen a proof of concept for OS 10 based on Dynamic Host Control Protocol, or DHCP. Luckily, that's only on the local area network layer. So you wouldn't see DHCP broadcasting over the internet. That's just on the LAN. So thankfully, that is the case. But since it is running a Unix stack, I would say that it is vulnerable, and to make sure that you are updated. Reason being is these remote exploits from shell shock, since it's operating system wide, the actual remote exploits that have been publicly disclosed are just the tip of the iceberg. We still haven't even scratched the surface of what's possible with this exploit. Yes, sir.
On the screenshot of the Perlbot, I noticed that they were using NRPE and Nagios. Do you know what they were necessarily using that for exactly?
Where was this?
Right there, about the middle, right under configuration.
Okay. Not. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, user local.
Yeah, they're calling NRPE. I was just curious.
Yes. My guess is that within these Perl bots, they tend to try to hide as other services. So they're trying to masquerade. Nagios being it's like a network monitoring tool. So they were trying to masquerade as a legitimate service. So whenever this Perl script is executed, if you do like a process show all on the system, it'll just show up as Nagios. All right. Pivot over here. Some slack here. See, I'll just use this. Bear with me 1 minute here while I get this hot.
What is the katakana sign?
Actually, my main
Paul.
job is a
Sir.
systems
What is the
administrator,
katakana
but
sign?
there's a ton of overlap.
It's hacker in Japanese.
So I'm kind of siloed into the information security side today, so to speak. It's a fascinating field. Yes. Yeah, we do everything from information assurance
It's
to systems administration
Japanese
work to
character
development.
set for typically foreign language words. So the characters are phonetics. And so when you sound it out, it sounds like a Japanese person saying that form. Like I remember someone reading.
All right, I think we're ready to roll here. All right, so for this exploit, what I have for the demo is I have a vulnerable Linux instance server running in a virtual machine here to your right. And if you can imagine that server is running out in the wild, to the left here is my command line interface for my local laptop. So I'll be attacking left to right there. Down at the bottom, I'm going to be capturing the traffic, mainly because I'm going to show you the user agent string with the actual exploit in it as I fire that off. So first, I want to show you that nothing exists, at least within the temp. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you might need your power cord or not, depending on that battery life or anything.
Oh yeah, I should be. This is a quick one.
Okay.
Hopefully, I should be all right. Think so.
It's got a power cord.
No, I should be okay.
Just claim that power loss is part of the attack.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Denial of service. Yeah.
And it succeeds.
Yeah. Very good. So since it's 9 o'clock in the morning, what I'm going to do is create a file on the server using the remote command execution vulnerability through the user agent string. To prove to you that I haven't created this file ahead of time, and because it's 9 o'clock in the morning, I wanted to ask the audience what their favorite cocktail is for that. Does anyone have a favorite cocktail?
Moscow Mule.
Moscow Mule sounds awesome. All right. So what I'll do here, I already have the proof of concept pulled up, and I'll echo this into a file into the temp directory, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we'll name that Moscow Mule. Thank you. Was it Danny? Thank you, Danny. Go ahead and fire it. And want to show you the live attack data here. So that's what the user agent string, as you can see, the environment variable exploitation. So we escape out of the actual instance of Apache web server in this case, execute bash with their command. So we echoing the command or the string corridor Fridays into the Moscow Mule that Danny likes to drink there. So let's take a look at the server here. Looks like it did create our file, the Moscow Mule. And just to show you that it has corridor Fridays in it. So it looks like exploit, and it's that simple, really. This exploit code is freely available on Pastebin. Quite a few sites as that exploit has come available. So pretty simple exploit to get at. But yeah, that's pretty much it. James?
Has the maturity of the exploits gotten into some of the common exploit toolkits yet? Where
Yes.
just kind of like throw.
Yeah, it's like automated exploitation. Yeah, I believe Metasploit does have a plugin for it already. So yeah, if you're playing with Metasploit, which is like a automated penetration testing tool, they do have plugins readily available for that. Not only for HTTP, but some of those other services that I showed you there.
So it's not only freely available, but even like at the script kiddie level, they
Oh, yeah.
already have access to it.
Absolutely, yeah. All set? Yes, sir.
I just had a question kind of in general about you guys over at Fish Labs. I don't know
Okay.
100% what you do, but like, I'm just curious, like, I mean, sometimes when you might bust like a hacker or whatever you call it, is there a process that you just report them like the FBI right away, or like?
Yeah, we can talk more offline about that.
Okay.
Since that is kind of proprietary, but mainly we do not deal directly with legal requests.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, mainly just an intelligence service that we market that as a service to our customers.
Could I see the exploit line real quick one more time? I was just
Sure.
wondering, didn't look like it required anything in the way of, yeah, so it didn't really require anything in the way of quotes or anything like that, or? It looks like there wasn't a real limit other than the length line of the
Yeah.
of the shell command.
Right. So this the exploit itself, or this particular one that I found, is written in PHP. So I execute it from the command line within PHP. It takes two flags. The first one being the actual URL to my VM
Right.
session here, and the /c is the command that's being executed on the server.
Gotcha.
So that,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You can go first.
Oh, what's up, Eric?
so that original underscore exploit would be the actual exploit someone would find in the wild.
That's correct.
To employ, and that was written by someone else too.
That's correct. Yeah, it was one of the first proof of concept codes that were pushed out. So.
Yeah, my understanding is you could execute this with a curl command pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not that high tech. Yeah.
Right. Even from the browser, if you have like a plugin that allows you to control your user agent, some like Firefox plugins allow that. So, yes, sir.
I noticed you did this from a laptop, and just out of sheer morbid curiosity, could this be done from a phone?
Ah, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, more than likely. I mean, phones have full internet stacks now.
As a former school teacher, I had children always asking me if I was going to teach them how to hack. I'm like, no. No, Jack, if I knew how to, you'd be the last person I tell. So.
Yeah, right.
But they all had phones, and they're like better than I've
Yeah.
got. So I'm thinking, hey,
I used to work for the school district, so I'm sure the network administrators there were very thankful for your input on that. Yeah. All set, guys? All right. Thanks for your time.
Great.
Thank you so much to both of our speakers this morning, and thank you to all of you for coming out. This presentation will be available online on our website, charlestondigitalcorridor.com. There'll be a link to the video as well as the presentation itself. So all of that information will be there for you if you'd like to revisit it. All of their sources and that kind of thing will be there as well. They both touched on this. Well, Paul is going to be leading on Saturday, December 6th, a workshop or a boot camp called How I Pwned Your Website. So he's going to be going through all of cybersecurity, and then we have our Hack Wars, as Henry mentioned, on Friday, January 23rd. So look for those on chscodecamp.com. You can sign up and register there. These are great opportunities to learn and to network a little bit more. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and get some more coffee and enjoy your Friday. Thank you.